you and I have to go down that road a little further, but I know that the lady who has agreed to be my co-host for the morning is itching to get in with a question. Go ahead, please, Rhoda.
Okay, so there are two questions that I want you to answer for me. You talked about the magnitude of problems that you've been dealing with since the layoff.
Correct.
Right. I want you to give us a sense of this magnitude so that it's not vague, so that we understand. And then after that, you were saying that there's some solutions that you guys were discussing on the table. If you could give us a sense of what those solutions were, what those solution discussions were about.
Okay, as it pertains to the magnitude, first and foremost, I would say that we must understand that the employees of ArcelorMittal, Centrin, and Tube City, respectively, are employees that have a specific skill set that you can't really apply to companies, to other employment across the country, right? One of the issues is that while you see termination, you see retrenchment taking place across the country, we have not been retrenched. We have been terminated. So we did not get that benefit. So even though that there was people with service over in excess of 20, 30 years, what they would have looked forward to in the event that they lose their job in absolution, they would have expected to have at least their severance.
Right.
They did not get that, right? So when you understand a man going home now with 1 month pay for 30 years service, and we must also understand that 40% of the 644 persons that have been terminated are about to be 50 or over the age of 50, right?
They're not exactly re-employable.
No, right? And these people would have already they were almost in their winding up years in terms of what they would have been securing in their life, as it pertains to their land, their homes, their vehicles, etc., etc., right? So this is the scenario now. They are left here with 1 month's salary, no future earnings, very little possibility of re-employment. And in the realm of re-employment now, when you look at a person who's normally preparing or living a lifestyle, they would take loans based on their salaries. The average salary per hour in ArcelorMittal would have been around $60.
Okay.
So when you look at these workers now, generally workers now, both the persons 50 and over and the younger persons who would have financial commitments as a result of their salaries that were there before, now going into the workplace, and the average salary in the country now in terms of the jobs that are available at a range around $25 to $30 an hour, right? And I'm being very liberal here. These people now cannot really service the financial obligations that they would have had prior. So the government talking about putting alleviation in place in terms of the employment, re-employment, retooling. You understand the predicament that these workers are in. Now, the impact. We have seen the psychological impact. I have seen it up close and personal.
Right. Now you said magnitude, so that's why I'm asking about a sense of numbers. How many people have you been having to deal with, cope with?
Of those 644 persons, 530 or so are bargaining unit workers. So we had roughly 120 or so that were managerial persons. They have not come forward, more or less. They have dealt with their issues privately, because we also remember that when workers were laid off, they continued to be employed.
Yes.
Right? So the 530 or so employees, we have had in excess of 300 persons that have been coming forward, that have had issues, financial issues, psychological issues, domestic issues. I know personally of a number of marriages now that are on the brink of being dissolved as a result of this, because wives are not being able to cope with their husbands not being able to pay the mortgage.
I can surely empathize with that, but it does raise a lot of other questions, but we shan't go there. I just want to finish off because I need to go into one of the calls made by your union at one time for the government to take over this industry. I want to get there in a minute. I just want to stay in the area. Is it time, I ask you, the hierarchy of your union, has it been discussed now that we have to look at all the conditions in which a company is granted let's say, granted to operate in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to look at all the concessions that are made to companies. We have to look at those, and among them being a pivotal one is the question, as the Minister of Labour said, for the totem pole to be readjusted, that severance, retrenchment, retirement benefits be moved up in the case of bankruptcy. Is that something that was being discussed before representation was made to the government on this before, or everything we're hearing now in that realm is a consequence of what happened? Is my question.
Well, from our activity as members of the Joint Trade Union movement, I know for a fact that calls have been made within the labor fraternity over the last couple of years for changes to the Severance and the Severance Benefits Act. I know that for a fact. But I think that a lot what would have escaped the sight of the labor fraternity would have been the Insolvency Act, because you did not see employers having the gall to take this kind of action against citizens in the country.
And while we are all surprised at that, is it not true to say that if you look around, because even from the information coming out of your union, you have seen the history of a company like Mittal. We have seen in England with Mittal, for instance, right now, dismissing 20,000 workers in the UK. In other words, before this actually hit us, there were signs before that companies are operating like this generally, but specifically in the steel industry. And when you take the information coming out of what China has been doing, which is dumping the cheap steel, one should have seen such an eventuality. Again, I am not holding your union responsible. I am asking for, as a representative of workers, is this not an area that your union had, one, with your expertise, seen people who advise you, and taken some steps to deal with such an eventuality?
Well, as one of the persons who would have been on point in terms of doing research for the organization, one of the factors that we took into consideration in analyzing our position in the globe in ArcelorMittal organization and what we represented was the fact that the factors that allowed this company, ArcelorMittal Point Leases Limited, to be a company that will continue to be viable in the group by virtue of the cheap resources that were present, the fact that we had an ability in our operation to produce a unique production in that we could produce any type of steel. Our flexibility in operation was different to most of the other companies in the organization. So when we looked at where we stood, early last year when we started to do research and analyze the whole scenario, we did not see in any way the Mittal sacrificing this company.
So you felt that our branch of Mittal had a lot more viability. And was
correct.
likely to last longer.
Yeah.
So then let me ask this. Does your union have people that have economic strength, economic backgrounds, or finance backgrounds, so that they're looking at what was going on with the company globally, not just in terms of the actual viability of factories or local branches, but looking at what was going on with the company's figures, so that way they would have a sense of what the company was going to scuttle?
No, but you have to remember as well, our organization is a very small organization, and the representatives that represent the organization come from the workforce. We are regular. I'm an operator in the melt shop. We are regular people. We are not persons that come from any special field. And
Gotcha.
You understand? So we are more or less. There's an election process, and you're elected from the group. So we didn't have that.
So that is the sort of thing that we are moving towards, because I plan to speak to JTM about this, because I would expect, particularly in an industry like yours, you want, as a member of a joint trade union movement, for the collective body of unions to find experts in these areas to point out to member unions, listen guys, we're looking at this and we're looking at this, that sort of thing. I have to kind of quantum leap because I'm watching the time, and I do have to inquire of you where we have seen it started out at this Scott, and then there was another incarnation, and then of course there is the ArcelorMittal situation here, and we see that ArcelorMittal, they have control over a large part of the global market, one way or the other, in the sense that they have the access routes to sell this thing through their subsidiary companies and so on. How profitable is it for the government to take over this? I mean, really, because it is not $1. We're not even discussing that. We know, right, it's been revealed in excess of $2 billion. So they're asking us to pick up a debt, which part of that debt I understand will be sold to subsidiaries of ArcelorMittal. So we in fact paying them for the blundering or their misfortune, whichever one. How doable is that? Really?
I want to make something clear.
Please.
We have not asked the government to take over.
Okay.
The company asked the government to. We are not advocating the government buying 1.35
You mean when you say we, you mean the union?
The union.
Right. So it's the company ArcelorMittal.
The company had asked the government
Okay.
for that.
Right.
The union never supported that.
Right.
What we did, because we recognize that our country is in an economic situation.
Right.
We recognize that the government is already saddled with a number of debt. We are not interested in the government taking $1.35 billion for $1 for free or for otherwise. What we did as a responsible organization in finding an avenue to try and bring some resolution to this matter and try and help our membership was that we went out and found people who would be interested in such a deal.
Right.
Because people have been hearing us in terms of what we said in terms of the viability of the plant, right?
But you had a number of those people back out, did you not?
We have had nobody back.
Nobody backed out?
No.
All right.
As a matter of
So who's
fact,
interested?
well, we have had a local, an investor who is local based but has foreign partners, and we've had another investor who is foreign with a local representative.
And they're interested in taking over the plant.
Let me tell you how serious these people have been. When we spoke to these people, we indicated that prior, while we spoke about the $1.35 billion debt, that the company had validated for us by virtue of their PricewaterhouseCoopers representatives in the meeting on March 11th, right? We decided that we are going to take into consideration the fact that the company owed the members of the union in excess of $1 billion TT dollars, right? And this is coming out of judgments that have been against the company for their abuse of workers over the last 20 years, where they were not paying workers who were working in bargaining unit positions benefits and salaries that they were entitled to. And the Privy Council made a ruling against the company that they needed to pay it 1998 coming forward. So when we did the calculation, it was in excess of $1 billion. So we took that into consideration and we added it to the figure. And we did tell the investor on initial contact that it was a $3 billion debt. And they had no problem with that. This is TT, $3 billion TT. Right? That's one thing they asked the first off the top of their head. They said, is it US? When they heard it was TT, they said no problem. So they did not have an issue. Right? Now, we have to understand the dynamics of this company in terms of how they wanted to sell the plant. Understand that they never offered the sale in the world market. They never offered it to anybody but the government of Trinidad and Tobago, which is very uncanny.
So they've kept it very local.